As we've heard so many times today and also yesterday, we know that innovation as we know it is more than just technology. It's progress despite the challenges that we face, and often with very, a lot of constraints and very difficult circumstances that surround the people that have to innovate within those circumstances. And these unreasonable constraints, from geopolitics to the digital divide that we heard, there are so many constraints that impede our ability to innovate. And in fact, we know that it is those constraints that often allow people to innovate despite those constraints. It's almost like a pressure cooker. It's the pressure that allows people to come up with great ideas. So from AI and geopolitics, we now shift our focus to gender politics for our fifth and final chapter of this forum. And this links back to, or this will be in two parts, this chapter. The first part, we will hear from a very special guest, also an expert in the field that joins us all the way from Taiwan. So Audrey Tang, we mentioned her yesterday. Audrey Tang is the digital minister for Taiwan. And they were also the youngest minister, actually, at the age of 35. And Audrey is also well known for being the first transgender and non-binary minister in the world. So I can think of no better expert on this field to address us and share their thoughts with us on the intersection of innovation and gender politics. So Audrey, over to you.
Dear friends, it is an honor for me to participate in the second edition of the Innovation and Politics Forum, organized by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, Middle East and North Africa. Despite the difficult times facing humanity, 2020 has granted us many opportunities. The opportunity to connect, regardless of the lockdowns. The opportunity to develop and redefine priorities on the individual and communal levels, as well as the opportunity to explore our boundaries and use technology to defy the boundaries. 2020 has granted us the time to advance and to progress through innovative means, and technology shows its ultimate potential to change our lives for the better. On the political, economic, and societal levels, innovation is now the cornerstone for change. Both as an individual hacktivist and also as a minister, my life has always been driven by the spirit of breaking entrenched structures, but building them anew in a way that's horizontal, crossing fixed vertical lines, making sure that the seemingly impossible possible, and also fun. So more often than not, I found that structured ideas could be changed. If you think about the lines, these were not as fixed as they seemed initially, and the impossible didn't have to remain a dream. If someone simply made the effort to question existing arrangement and dare to introduce new ways of looking at the world, then if we start thinking outside the box, introduce the unknown mechanisms that are become known, then this work will suddenly open up new pathways in front of our eyes, and that gave us whole new perspective to how social cohesion is possible. Among all topics that I have tackled as a politically active figure so far, gender equality has always been especially dear to my heart. It is a topic surrounded by particularly encrusted structures, the lines that go as far as eyes can see. And for many women and men and transgender people all over the world, gender equality feels like a concept that they will not see accomplished during their lifetime, especially around this corner of Earth. However, achieving gender equality in its entirety may not be possible in most of the countries if we act alone, but we can act together to introduce innovative policies that remain to be designed, and we can develop and bring forward by creative researchers, civil society organizations, and politicians that can help us alone. In my view, a cornerstone for developing and promoting such policies are those very technological innovations that enable the politics and the civil society members to work together and find joint solutions, common values out of varying positions. The social innovation. for people's participation in decision-making, to me, is as democratic and as liberal as it gets. Democracy itself is a technology, and if a democratic government can find itself to trust its own citizens, open up its own structures for the population by means of technology, incorporate them in the agenda-setting process, then this can be a perfect example of how innovation can be a tool to connect citizens with governments. Because my firm belief is that citizens are always the best social innovators. The wisdom is at the edge. If the democratic institution work in a transparent, participatory, and accountable way, then digitalization can be very powerful to break the trends, increase awareness, access, and inclusion of opportunities, especially for social groups that are currently experiencing marginalization. In Taiwan, we have dedicated ourselves to bring technology into the space where the citizens live, rather than expect citizens to enter the space of technology. Broadband, as a human right, is at the core of the government's policy. Our national participation platform, of which more than 10 million people join out of a country of 23 million, anyone can begin an e-petition that can lead to relevant ministries to respond in public and collaborate on collaborative meetings. As digital minister, I have also established a network of participation officers in each ministry. They serve as liaison, as links between the public and the public sector, and also as channels for the interagency collaboration. Whenever a proposal is raised on the e-petition platform, a collaborative meeting could be held with participants from all over government departments as well as the public stakeholders invited to join and jointly create new policy. It is through these tools and mechanisms that we tackle the topics of gender equality in Taiwan, and much has happened in recent years. On May 17, 2019, the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, Taiwan's Parliament passed the Enforcement Act of the Judicial Yuan Interpretation 748, and thereby legalized same-sex marriage. This achievement made in Taiwan was a historic first in all of Asia and was not fulfilled overnight, of course. It took the effort of both the government and the civil society joining their forces on petition platforms such as the Joint platform and running through consultations thanks to the mutual trust and respect. The implementation of the act marked the beginning of governmental service as such in Taiwan for homosexual equality when it comes to wedding between individuals. The adoption of civic innovations in the public sector and in politics has particularly required the government and civil society and the business sector organizations to come together to form a collaborative ecosystem for their collective impact. I'm aware that in the MENA region, activists, innovators, and change makers of all sorts are operating under sometimes very severe conditions of violence and of war. To all of these courageous human beings, fellow Homo sapiens, I would like to say, do not give up. Choose the road not taken. However small a change may be, it is still our contribution to a much larger process to a more democratic future. And I sincerely wish you live long and prosper.
Thank you, Audrey. Live long and prosper to you as well. And thank you to the leadership that you've shown in this very difficult two worlds that collide, gender equality and digitalization. It seems like two things that are so, I mean, you kind of need to be an expert just in one just to survive, and you somehow embody both of these and bring them together in such a practical way. And thank you also for the innovations that you take in your department through connecting government with the citizens. So we commend you for that, and thank you very much. So now for the second part of this chapter on gender politics, I want to invite onto the stage our last moderator for this conversation, Radu Magdin. He is joining us all the way from Bucharest, and he is the CEO of Smartlink Communications, and he joins me on a chair. Radu, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. It's an honor to be here today with all of you, and it's a very, very exciting Sunday. Not only because of chapter 5 and the final mission to be like the cherry on top after very successful, 4 panels, but also because we have a niche, very important topic. Yeah. We're going to be talking today together with 4 exceptional lady professionals. We're going to be talking about innovation and gender and how we can stimulate change in the MENA region. So I'm very, very excited about that. And what can I say? I'm happy to be here with you for the next 1 hour and 10 minutes, and we're keeping you in for a lively discussion.
Fantastic. Radu, we are all ears. And can I just say, who would have known it was exactly to the day 1 year ago when you and I met for the first time in Germany. And if you had told me we had to fast forward 1 year later and we're going to be sitting on this virtual stage together, I would not have believed you. We are super intrigued for this conversation, and I'm going to hand over to you to take it from there.
Thank you so much. Welcome everybody once again. And although I understand that there may be some kind of a video fatigue after a few hours of interesting panels, nonetheless, you know, technologies are allied in this complicated COVID world. And we should always understand that while COVID is a game changer, we should not forget about the most important things in our life. And one of the most important things in our life is progress. MENA is a region who has progressed a lot, has been innovated a lot, has been more and more focused on gender issues and how change can happen. And COVID-19 should be a game changer also from this perspective. A way to accelerate things, not a way to use COVID as an excuse for stepping back. So from this perspective, I'm very, very excited to be moderating a panel of 4 exceptional women professionals with different backgrounds. Some come from international organizations, some come from the international private sector, some from journalism and civil society, and some have been managing to score well in politics across continents. And this way we have a diversity of views of people who have managed to bring to life, I would say, a dream and an aspiration to move forward, and people who have inspirational stories for you. So without further ado, let me tell you that I'm very happy to introduce our 4 lady participants. I'm going to start with Fadia Kiwan, the Director General of the Arab Women Organization. Hello, Fadia. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to continue with Karima Bouchtaoui. She's a Dutch politician for the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, VVD. Good morning, Karima. Same here. I'm going to continue with Luna Safwan. She's a freelance journalist and communication specialist. Hi, Luna.
Good morning. Very nice to be here with you.
Same here, thank you. And last but not least, Anca Bogdana Rusu, Partnerships, Policy and Advocacy with Celo. Thank you so much, Anca, for being with us today.
Thank you, Radu. Hi to you and all of the fellow panelists. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you too very much. So essentially, in order to keep your attention full on, what we propose is for us to get into a few minutes of ideas from each of our panelists, and then we'll be entering into a Q&A discussion, which will focus on the most interesting aspects for our audience. So we're going to first start in the order we mentioned with Fadia, and I'm going to kindly ask you, Fadia, to share some of your perspectives on how we can implement this change in the MENA region by using innovation, gender, and all a lifetime experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Radu. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to join this session. I know that talking about politics is today not only addressing a goal, but also using a tool. Because with the agenda of the United Nations 3020, we know that addressing the sustainable development is the main issue of all policy and decision makers. So it's easier for us today to speak of politics as a tool and a goal at the same time. As you may know, addressing women issues started the early 20th century by saying we have to send girls to school. This is all what they wanted to do. In a second stage, they looked at the legislation and said we have to eliminate discrimination in the legislation against women and girls. In a third stage, they thought of increasing the involvement of women in the economy. And they knew it was not sufficient neither. So the fourth stage was talking about politics, frontly about politics. And I may refer to the action plan of Beijing, the platform of Beijing, addressing the issue of the participation of women, putting a ceiling for 2000 to reach 30%. Now we are in 2020, and we are still very far from reaching the 30%. And we have had a fifth stage, more close to us today, dealing with violence, because we could see that violence may refrain women from participation in politics. It may refrain women from reaching their basic and fundamental rights, and from going to school and from going to work and everything. So we have 5 stages. My reference to the political one is still important, because I have to close the circle by saying, even if I want to erase all forms of violence against women and girls, I have to go to politics. So as politics is decision-making and policy-making, today we don't speak about decision-making only. We speak about anticipating the future and policy-making. And by policy-making, women should be involved as decision makers in policy making. They should address their own goals and the national and international global goals as well. So in saying that, I may say that today the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations made it easier for all of us, but we are fully committed today to empower women and to encourage them to enter the arena of politics and to be empowered enough to be the real decision makers, and not only people who are formally standing and who are manipulated from behind them by any other person. So this is a main issue of today, politics.
Thank you so much. You raised so many important issues. And speaking of real policymaking and real presence in politics, I'm very happy to have among us somebody who has fought all the way, changing a country and rising in the new political system. I'm very happy to give the floor now to Karima to share some of her thoughts with us.
Thank you, Radu. Great to be here with you, and also thank you for the invite to join this beautiful panel. It's very important to talk about innovation and gender, especially for the MENA region. My experience in daily life in the Netherlands and as a politician, I see that the COVID-19 is a crisis, but gives also many opportunities. So I hope also in the MENA region that the COVID-19 gives many opportunities to create new technical and new jobs. And gender equality culture should be the norm, as I said before. And this is a priority at all levels. I also see that in my daily life in the Netherlands, political. And it's very important, just like Mrs. Kiwan said before, that in business, politics, but also education and daily life, we have to use the benefit of innovation. And women in the Middle East should also be able to use and gain the profit of innovation in their daily life. If you have broadband internet, that's very important now in our daily life with the COVID-19 measures. So you can have your own opportunity to get a job or a new business. And that is why we politicians must be very, very keen on having equal chances for everybody, because it's very important to gain your own income, to be independent. And in my opinion, a crisis just like COVID-19 gives us different opportunities. So it's very important, just like Mrs. Kiwan said, we also do it in the Netherlands, that women must be involved in decision making. And decision making is not only in a political party, it's also in the area of our daily life, in our boards, business boards, and also in all kind of boards in education. So I'm a very optimistic person. Yes, 2020 was a bizarre year for us all, but I believe if we gain the opportunities of COVID-19 and opportunities of innovation, that we can make a step forward in gender equality for women, especially in the region. Thank you.
Karima, thank you so much. And I love the fact that you were not quick to stamp, like a lot of other people did, stamp 2020, like we say, like annus horribilis, like a horrible year. You said it was bizarre, and I agree with you, it's a weird year, right? And we should, at the same time, you know, we live in a weird world, and I would say that each region has its own complexities. And speaking of complexities, Luna, you have an overview of this region, and you have seen also big dramas in the region because you have been writing about them. You've seen refugees, you've seen violence, but you also have seen what this region has best to offer, you know. And speaking of COVID-19, because this brings two new crises, to a cocktail of crises existing or looming in the region. I mean, from this perspective, how could we move forward? And I'm very happy to pass the floor to you.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to build on what Karima and Dr. Fadia were saying, and is that it has been a bizarre year, but it also has been an opportunity for us all to really learn. And women have been pushed to the front in different countries. Now, I'm a firm believer that if women are given the space to lead independently, this would be a factor that would certainly and surely stimulate change, and not only in Lebanon, but in the MENA as a whole. The angle that I'm really addressing today combines politics and media, because as you said, I've covered different countries, and the most common factor that I've seen in the past few years, but that has also flourished in 2020, is women being pushed to the front by themselves and by other women as well, which has been very inspiring. I can talk about the Lebanese experience, but I've also witnessed it in different countries. We see the names of women activists all over the media. And I covered politics, and I saw women leading protests, and I saw women trying to lead negotiations as well. Which is why when we talk about change and innovation, there's a lesson that we can learn from 2020 when it comes also to technology, to innovation, to women, and to politics. And it's that women are fighting on all different fronts. A mother is not only today a mother only, she's also the teacher who has to teach her kids at home and who has to follow up with online classes. She's also the career woman who has a full career to also work on and to establish, same as her husband. So this is where equality becomes a real necessity. We lack in the MENA a lot of complementary models and a lot of laws that empower women. And this is where we cannot keep empowering each other as women only, but we need the law. We need laws to empower us and to push us more to, you know, try and accomplish what we can, as much as we as women are trying to push ourselves. And now definitely COVID has opened a whole floor into what women need in the MENA region, especially not always having the platform, because it happens unequally in different countries, depending on the norms, on the values, and depending also on the safety of women themselves. So 2020 has been a learning opportunity, but we need to focus more on changing the laws that empower us as women.
Luna, thank you so much. And you raised as well a lot of important issues. Let me just extract one of them. Yeah, you mentioned very well the fact that right now we're all focused into multitasking, and perhaps women and mothers even more than most of us, you know. And you stress a lot the role of technology, speaking also of our wider topic, innovation in politics. And if I were to start from technology and how it can enable change and how it can further empower women across MENA, I'm very happy right now to pass the floor to Anca, who has a rich experience from this perspective in fintech and not only. So Anca, please have the floor.
Thank you so much for that intro, Radu. Agreed. Like, I think it's important to understand that technology, like any other tool, has risks and benefits. It's something that in the hands of people, it can be used in a variety of ways. And I think it was on one of the yesterday's panels a good note about how it can be used both to advance women's rights as to detract from them. Historically speaking, I think that we see that gender equality comes about, especially in times of need. We see big jumps in gender equality after the Two World Wars. We see big jumps in, at least from a policy perspective, in gender equality when communism came about and the governments needed labor force, which is something that we see to some extent reflected in some of the MENA region today with the diversification away from oil and the need to bring women into the labor force. And I think, like, again, historically, you go from the bicycle to the internet and arguably now to AI and blockchain, and for the past century, we see that innovation really has been going hand in hand with advancing women's rights and closing the gender gap in both economic and societal areas. Things that we take for granted today: a refrigerator, a washing machine, a dishwasher, right? Have been shaping the lives of women and girls worldwide and enable them to pursue opportunities that weren't accessible before. Still, we find a lot of preconceived ideas about what jobs and activities are appropriate for women that are still enshrined in legislation in over 90 countries, which in time then leads women being unable to access certain educational degrees, work certificates, and pursue career paths. And I think technology is one of them, right? Despite the growing conversation about diversity representation, women are still underrepresented in tech. Which ultimately means that the technology that our lives are increasingly relying on are being built by men and for mostly men. And legacy systems are always difficult to change. Not impossible, but difficult. The opportunity, though, that I see and the advantage of technology is that it moves faster than any other industry. And then with each shift, the opportunity for renewal comes. With each wave of innovation, brings with it the opportunity for a fresh start and the ability to design the experience in a way that's inclusive. And one of the biggest opportunities that I see there is honestly with blockchain technology and AI. Because they're so new, I think for the first time women have the opportunity to shape the field with needing to play catch up first, right? And again, some of these innovations come in an area of digital finance, or the ability to work from home securely in a way that women really have the ability to shape the industry, and women as builders, and get out of that idea of seeing women as beneficiaries.
Thank you so much, and for raising a lot of important issues. I would start from two of the things you mentioned. I believe this is something which is, in a way, is like a silver lining touching upon our four introductory speeches. You mentioned degrees and catching up. And whether we like it or not, COVID-19 is like the elephant in the room that we can't ignore, right? And I think that if we're looking at education as the way forward to advance things in the region, I mean, what would you see the immediate opportunity? Okay, 2020 is almost lost, if not ending, you know, in all its alleged glory, right? But we have 2021 and so on. We have a decade in front of us. Speaking of an earlier introductory talk, we have the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Agenda 2030. How could we, 2021 plus, from your perspective, just a few suggestions, you know, I mean, how can we combine this innovation, digitization, education, and empowerment agenda? I mean, whether we're talking about access to education, you know, perhaps lowering costs due to technology and further advancing the empowerment, I suggest we keep, for the sake of technology, the same order as of the speakers. So Fadia, please.
Thank you, Radu. Thank you. I would like to be a little bit provocative, as we are talking about 2020 and COVID-19. I may say that we are easily led to consider that using innovation, using technology could help women to reconciliate their job and their domestic missions. But unfortunately, this is a way to reproduce the traditional roles of men and women, and to consider that women have by nature domestic works, and they may do something else if they would like to do something else. I would say that this is a side effect of the technology, because we don't want women to remain at home. When COVID-19 will be over, and I wish and I hope, fully hope that it will be over very soon, we would like women to go out of their homes and to meet people and to work with people. And on the contrary of the social distancing, we want women to be everywhere, on all platforms and everywhere. So I may recognize that COVID-19 gave us a proof that women could accommodate with this natural disaster. They could really reconciliate what they traditionally have to do. But at the same time, we have witnessed an increase in violence against women because of confinement at home. So COVID-19 gave us many lessons and brought to us in a blunt way the fact that we have to work on consolidating laws that protect women. Luna was talking about laws. We need, of course, to work on the frame, on the rule of the game in all societies. And those is a fundamental, a basic front line for us in our work for change. But to do so, we need to work also on the mindset of people. In the Arab world, I don't want to talk about the MENA region in very vague terms. I would say that in the Arab world, we have a deep problem of dealing with the mindset of people. When it comes to politics, most of Arab regimes, Arab governments, let's say, not Arab regimes only, most of Arab governments had in the last decade a choice, a strategic choice to adopt a quota system to involve women in politics. But we made lately an assessment based on 5 case studies in Arab countries, and we found that even though women are not sustained in their positions in politics, if ever you suspend the quota system, you will see no women in the arena. So we have to work also on the mindset of people, because in some cases, and it is paradoxical, governments are more advanced than the country itself, the deep, let's say the deep country, and civil society is divided among itself between people who are progressist, advanced, and those who are reflecting the past and trying to resist the change. We have these 2 trends in our societies, in most of our societies. We have a trend of change and a trend of conservatism. We do have these 2 trends. So our work would be on many levels, on many fronts. We have to empower women to give substance to their participation in politics, but we have also to work on the culture, education, and the media, ladies, the media as well, not to reproduce the traditional woman with the traditional roles of women only, and to reflect. I would say we should reflect this contradiction in society. We should reflect it. We should agree that we are not fully committed to change. We are not fully committed to see women going out of home, out of COVID-19, when COVID-19 will be over. We should work, in some fields we are working from scratch, and we should agree that we have many fronts to combat, empower women, change laws, enforce the laws sometimes to prevent and protect women from violence, and work on the culture, on education, on the content of books, on the content of teaching. I was dealing this morning with a lady who was inviting me to a conference. She's using in Arabic the term of Director General addressed as a man. I said, no, but you should adapt it to a woman. She said, but it's stronger if it is addressed to him. So we have to work indeed on many levels. I don't want to be very long, but we have a lot to do, and we have to work all together, not only to use technology. We have to work all together in many fields with many many professionals in many fields. We should think strategically, even if we work on specific issues. Our thinking should be strategic. It means comprehensive, looking forward, and planning for the future. Thank you, Radu.
Thank you too very much. And once again, you raised a lot of topics on this. Let me just touch upon two issues as a further question. You mentioned, of course, there's always, let's say, the good camp, the progressive camp, the camp who wants to do more, but there's also a camp of resistance, the camp who resists change, which we don't really talk about in a lot of cases. And I also loved how you put this, a women's missions, and I don't think that for us it should be, it should be mission possible to change mentalities. And speaking of this time of a pop culture and Mission Impossible, over there we have a hero, but the hero that can afford to save the world because the hero doesn't have to get online to put the baby at 9 o'clock, to feed the baby at 8, to put the baby at classes at 9 a.m. and so on. So women are our heroes and women make it. Single or together with kids and so on. So Karima, tell me from your perspective, because you've seen also a society, a MENA society at home, but you've also joined another society, adapted to it and grew into its politics, and you saw the challenges. Talk to us about education and this dual model in a way.
Yes, thank you, Radu. Well, what I see is that in the MENA region this year in 2020, we have approximately 30 million college graduates. That means 30 million boys and girls who are having their education to work. In my opinion, just like Mrs. Fadia Kiwan said, you have to go for more options. It's culture, that's true. You have the progressive culture, and you have the traditional culture, and you have education. And in my opinion, you have to combine these two. And we cannot have gender equality also without the man. It's not just a fight for us women. We need the men also too, because the men are our sons, our brothers, our fathers. And if we don't get them with us, then it will be a struggle for only us women. And here in the Netherlands, in West Europe, we also see a very progressive group, also with men, and we have a traditional group. And in my opinion, we women must not only struggle alone, we have to get the men among us. And in my opinion, it's also very important to have a larger number of women. I would love it if they do that when they're in the college period, to be political active, because if you get into political parties, and in my opinion, it's not only the liberal parties, but most of all also the traditional parties, but you have to get on board to work behind the scene of a political party, because political parties write campaign programs, and they are just in the seats when they win the elections, and to get into more. But they have the power to make some little steps to change when they are in a government. And in my opinion, we also need those in governments, and those in government must also have more women. And if we don't get more women political active, then we won't see more women in politics. And I know it's a very hard struggle, just like Mrs. Kiwan said, but we don't have to give up. We have to set on multiple levels, education, politics, and also the boards of companies.
I fully agree with you. If I were to summarize, he for she, power for she, speaking and involvement, and being over there all across the process. And speaking of power for she, but also about what has happened in this region, because this MENA region, I can tell you from my experience from outside the region, is one of the most charming regions of the world, but also one of the most conflicting regions in the world. And Luna, you have seen, let's say, its charm, and you have witnessed its charm, but also its conflict. And I mean, one of the topics which was also raised earlier was the idea about violence and politics. I mean, from your experience, can we go beyond the violence in the region? And can we use even a violent context to see heroes rise, female heroes rise, to create inspiration for those societies?
Well, I want to talk about 2 points that will actually lead us to this conclusion. or to answer this. We, in the MENA region, in the Arab world, as Dr. Fadia said, we always see that there are shows on television where men are cooking. You know, the man is the cook. And everyone accepts this, and everyone follows the footsteps, and it seems nice and it seems interesting. And yet, when we are to talk about parental leave, about the man assisting the woman, the father assisting the wife, we witness a conflict because of the norms, because of the values. So I want to emphasize on what the ladies mentioned before me. We can do this, we can implement this change through two main points. First, education. We need to change our history, our education books. There needs to be a new set of norms. There needs to be a new normal for young generations, but also for the parents who help their children study, to be able to maybe absorb that there is a kind of change that is happening that starts from the book and that goes a long way. Second, the law. We cannot impose anything, but the law, you know, it draws the borders on where we should act and how we should act. So when you have a law that specifically says that a man and a woman must try and divide the tasks. So this means a mother has the access to technology, the father has the access to technology, but they will both need to come to a sort of agreement on who needs to work on what and who needs to educate the children and who needs to take more responsibility. This sphere of change introduces women more into the public sphere, which is something that I want to touch base on to answer your question. Women are more than necessary in politics. And in Lebanon, as a small example, women are very present in the political sphere of universities and in the political fights. And I always say, I'm a very firm believer that having different politics and having different political parties is the way to change. You cannot eliminate your opponent, but you need to sit with them and you need to discuss what are the differences that will bring you together, actually, to build a society that could be built on conflicting differences, but without an actual conflict. So women have been pushed to this in Lebanon, specifically in universities. However, what we are lacking, I think, in Lebanon, and to move it to the MENA region, is the representation. When you have women who are represented in the parliament or in the cabinets and the governments, when these women push for these laws, for these new education books, for this new type of conversation, this is when it becomes a bit more acceptable. You put a woman in the front, same as my first example, as the man who cooks in a TV show and everyone accepts him. And then the society starts listening bit by bit. It will take years, but it will start listening. And when you implement these laws firmly, and I really mean firmly, and not just to have them on paper, there will be less domestic violence, because people will understand that there are consequences. And when you address, most importantly, the psychology of women, of men, of family, and of equality. What is the psychology of gender, actually? Because we lack that in the Arab world, in the MENA, in Lebanon, in Syria, you name it, in all of the countries surrounding us. We need to understand the psychology of gender, and that, as we said, it is not only women who need to fight, because without a man, of course, a woman can survive, but she would need to push harder for these norms and for these laws to be implemented. But imagine 3 women and 1 man. You know, this would bring out even more power to the cause. So I think we could get there. 2020 has definitely been a learning opportunity, but we need to change the education. And that's the key to innovation, to politics, and to also conflict resolution at a certain age.
Luna, thank you so much. Hopefully 4 women and a man online can also bring about change, not only for 1 hour and 15 minutes, but also for way beyond. I loved how you frame it, new norms, new normal, and at the same time talking about, I would reframe it as pop culture, the stimulus around us to change mentalities. And speaking of a stimulus, speaking of nudges, of ways by which we can bring in technology and prosperity, you know, in order to upend the game. Anca, we're really looking forward for your perspectives on the technological side in education.
Thank you so much for that. I think there's a couple of ways where obviously technology plays a phenomenal role But I will start with one example that's perhaps not one of the most customary ones. And if you look at the past election cycle in the United States, you see that a lot of funds have flown from people such as Melinda Gates or Mackenzie Bezos, and I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, towards lobby and advocacy and getting elected women and people who have been advocating for gender equality on a number of issues. And so I think this is one of the ways where technology can help, which is enabling people that have made, quite honestly, a fortune out of it to lobby and build alliances. There's politics to react, politics to react to what people care about in education, and being able to see that funds, even from a political perspective, flow towards the cause of equality, because women have reached those leadership positions where they're able to push the funds towards it. I think it's one way where technology helps. I will definitely echo what some of the previous speakers have said, which is, if we look at technology as only a way that enables you to work from home, then yes, I think there's a big argument as to where this can be a risk to pushing back the cause of gender equality and having women represented and working outside the home. At the same time, from a societal perspective, when crisis comes, people tend to go back to what they're used to. They react in fear and go back to what they're comfortable in. And we've seen that a lot with this crisis, where a lot of the care work has been falling on women. And so whether it's setting up a tablet for a child to learn online, or making sure that they have the help that they need, it's still disproportionately has fallen on women. And I think in between that, the gender violence that we have seen, and women, again, because the traditional labor markets are built for prime age males, and that pressure of providing for the family, women have disproportionately lost their jobs because they had to make the choice between caring for the family, caring for elders, or being there. From an educational perspective, let me just share an anecdote. I was in Beirut just about a year and a half ago at the American University of Beirut, working with the software developers at the university. And some of the most impressive ones, including the ones leading the Association of Students, were women working on really important technology issues. I think it's something to celebrate, and it's something to be mindful of, because women feel the need and have the need to be extraordinary to succeed in a domain where men don't need to push quite the same, again, because of norms. But with technology, and I think this is where I see potential of technology freeing up a lot of the time that women have tied up in traditional gender roles. Education comes through many avenues, and being able to reflect some of the aspirations that we want to see from women's rights and equality, anywhere from YouTube videos to popular series, which is something that I see quite useful and has been very effective, both in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, where a lot of the narratives around gender equality, or back when I was at the World Bank, narratives around how to teach women more about digital finance, digital health, how to save, were intertwined into soap operas, into cartoons, into a lot of the material that was really accessible on television, and did wonders into showing representation and showing women how they can access a lot of these services. But education is a great tool. I think we want to be very mindful that talking about college students who have access to education is one thing. Talking about, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, it's a very different issue, and COVID really risks at really promoting some of these inequalities on one hand, because not everybody has access to that technology. On the other hand, it brings an opportunity, whereas with certain families which choose not to send their daughter to school because it's too expensive or secure, now the school can't come at home. So it's all a little bit about how do you frame it and how do you use the tools that you have available.
Thank you so much, Anca. And you also raised a lot of issues. Thank you so much for underlining the fact that technology is not just an enabler to work from home. You also raised a lot of issues about digital finance, about lobbying, about health issues. Now, I would propose for us to go into another round looking at the region. You know, I'm Eastern European, you know, Anca, you're a fellow Romanian, you know, although exported like I was for a while, you know. I'll give you an example for our region. We modernized, we went through a lot of change. We also had our transition. Perhaps sometimes in a region, transition never ends. And I think this is one of the dilemmas for each region of the world. And we're going to refer to MENA, or I loved how the frankness of Fadia when she said, like, to be even more precise, the Arab world. Yeah? Looking at the MENA, or more widely at the Arab world, you know, are we that special in the sense that, I mean, and speaking of enacting change, I mean, we speak sometimes of best practices which can be imported, but is there something also to export? Or is there, let's say, how would you feel, what would be the right balance, you know, to strike in between, let's say, some kind of a sense of a regional tradition, and a sense of healthy modernization, particularly for the gender cause?
I guess you are
the same with Fadia.
Yeah, thank you, Radu. I would like first to settle a problem raised earlier by our Netherlands parliamentarian. I think she spoke about seeing men involved in women issues and as women involved in public issues. Let me tell you that there is a real dilemma for women dealing with politics in the Arab world anyway, because they usually consider that they don't owe their election to women. So most of women may consider they don't have to adopt a gender agenda in being in the parliament. So the best way to think of this is to consider that we have two schools of thought about women issues. The first school of thought is a traditional one. I should have said what it is before giving its name. But this school of thought considers that we have to enhance and empower women and enhance their situation at home, as mother, as a spouse, as being the stability regulator, the regulator of the stability of the family. Their consideration is always linked to the family, to the role as a mother, as looking after satisfying their husbands, their family. And this school is willing, really willing to work to enhance women's situation, women's health, to protect women from violence, against violence, and so on. But their perspective of work is limited to the family. The second school of thought is the liberal one. This school of thought considers women as partners. So they look at women with the lenses of citizenship. Men are not only our husband, father, brother, and lovers, and sons. Men are our partners in citizenship. So they look at the emancipation of women from the traditional status to a more open status as partners with men in all fields, starting with the family. Why not to have the days of holidays for fathers? Why not? We were told that there is a resistance because they consider he should not have this leave because he is a father. But usually, if we consider that even in the family, in education, women and men, fathers and mothers should share responsibilities and be complementing each other, we start with this sphere and we go outside the family, and we will see that everywhere we should have women and men dealing with all issues. When we adopt the sustainable development strategy, we can settle this dilemma because women issues are part of sustainable development, so men working in politics should adopt this strategy and look at women issues as well as they look at all other issues. And women should look at all other issues, not only on gender issues. This perspective is strategic, comprehensive, and in so doing, we will not be working as woman for woman and only for the family. We will be working and addressing all issues in society, starting with the climate change and finishing with the family and the babies and the custody, which are very hot issues for women in the Arab world, since we are talking about the overload. And I think that we should have a realistic approach, not only a strategic one. The realistic approach is to set priorities. And I agree, I confess, in the Arab world, looking at the legislation regarding the family, the custody, the status of women is vital, is very important, and it should be in our priorities. And we are, in the Arab Women Organization, addressing this issue to enhance the situation of women in regard of this sphere of life. Because in this sphere of life, everything starts, discrimination starts with this sphere. So we should start with this sphere, but we start both on working on legislations, on regulations, on application of laws and implementation of laws, and at the same time we work on the mindset of women themselves, on girls, to make a real change in their attitude, because we look at women as vectors of change. So they should start changing their own situation. So this way of thinking should put our priorities in our priorities, the life of women and the family, but also legislation in any country in order to offer to women all opportunities. We don't speak about equality between men and women. We speak about equal opportunities for men and women, girls and boys. Equal opportunities without any preliminary mindset setting that these roles are women roles and that roles are men roles. Out of the biological roles, of course, I'm talking about social roles. Social roles are neutral. Both men and women can occupy this or that function depending on their capabilities. And in the same time, the society should give them both the same opportunities to fill this or that role in society. We are talking about social roles, of course. So I can reconcile the strategic approach and the realistic agenda. And by country, I may have different priorities in different countries. In Mauritania and Yemen, I have different priorities than in the Gulf area. I have specific priorities in the North African states, in Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, who are a little bit advanced, more advanced than other countries in terms of legislations and practices towards women opportunities in social life and especially in politics. But depending on agendas of a country, we look at supporting the governmental efforts, and we look at networking with civil society and national machineries within a country in order to see everybody participate to the change, because we cannot work in an atomistic way to have a change. The change will not come tomorrow, but when we launch the change, we have to keep in mind that we should continue pushing forward, and we should keep running. We should keep trying all the time without any hesitation.
Thank you so much, Fadia, for this passionate plea. You know, sometimes with my friends, you know, who are married, we say happy wife, happy life. If I were to reframe a little bit the two theories that you mentioned, you know, I would say first, happy woman, happy family versus happy partner, you know, and I loved your priorities, rules, and mentalities. Now, I'm very excited to also hear your thoughts. Karima?
Fadia explained it very, very keen. In the middle, the MENA region, you cannot compare the countries. There is a difference in progress in the MENA region, absolutely right. So if you make any programs or you set some goals, be sharp of that. What I also liked about how what Fadia explained, and that was also where I started with, is you have to start in the homes and the families. And it's very good to have a very strategic program, but real change comes from the homes, the families, the parents, the children. And like I said before, we need our partner. We women need strong man, and a strong man needs a strong woman. So that is also very, if you're familiar with the Arab culture, we know that. My roots are in North Africa, Morocco. My parents came from Morocco. And in our culture, we also say, if you have a strong man, that strong man also needs a strong woman. So that's very similar, I think, also for Luna in the Arab region. And you have to cope together. For me, it's also very important that we benefit from the opportunities that COVID-19 brought us. Think about broadband internet. We must not focus only on high-level jobs. We also must focus on women who want to have their own small company. It's very important to have internet. If you have internet, you can also have your online payments. And it's very fantastic what I see on social media, how young girls and boys in the MENA region get with both hands the opportunities of social media and get their own business. Not everybody wants to be a doctor or a dentist or something else with a university degree. We also have to keep in mind that we have to create jobs at all levels, because if we have jobs at all levels, it means that women can earn their own money. And that is very important also in the MENA region and the Arab country, because if you don't forget your background and your history, in the Arab world, in the history, women were also working, businesswomen, gaining their own money and doing their own business. So we have to get back to our identity in the Arab world. And that's why I'm very optimistic. We have to use the benefits and everything that created this bizarre year 2020 of COVID-19. Yes, we are very hurt by the people we have lost. It's very difficult, but also please, we have to be positive and look at the opportunities, embrace them. And I want to end my story with strong women need strong men. And that is what we must not forget.
Thank you so much for stressing that. I fully agree with you. And I would not only say that, I would also say that you can't really be a strong man if you don't acknowledge that part of your strength is respecting the strong women next to you.
Yes.
If you don't allow for the personality of your partner in the relationship and so on. So I fully resonate with you, and I'm very happy right now to also pass to Luna for her thoughts.
I don't think that we need to copy any other countries specifically in the MENA region or in any of the countries here. But I also don't think that we need to fully give up our norms, our values, our culture. There's a way in between. We all travel and we bring back experiences. So I'm going to talk here as a media person, since we discussed media first. This is where the role of media becomes necessary, not by portraying that, you know, women in Europe or in the States or in other countries have all their rights, and you know, this is making the woman powerful and she can accomplish whatever she wants, and all of this perfectionist or picture perfect kind of thing. What we need as media is to emphasize on what actually made this possible in the society. So what did men in power do? Who supported these women and who actually stood against them, and what were the lessons learned? So we don't need exactly to copy Europe or to copy any other countries, but we need to extract what made these countries evolve in this way and give opportunities to women without putting men on the side. Because we can advance as women and we can get to a place where we can actually fairly compete with men, without making it sound like a war of raising one another. You know, it's me or no one. At the same time, I believe that we have an amazing culture in the Arab world. We have great values where, if you go back to the roots of it, I'm not talking about what happened in the recent years because of all of this stress and the internet and the change of culture and the violence, but I'm talking about the recent years of our culture. Women are cherished by men. And women are made very special in the society. So as much as this put us in a vulnerable position, whereas, you know, a lot of people, you know, are afraid that a woman would break or she would cry or she would be too sensitive. But at the same time, I believe that we can work with this as media. We can combine what we need from the West versus what we have here and what can be developed. And of course, the education and law are very important. But to go back to the starting point of my work as a media professional, I think that independent media can innovate a lot by highlighting what is missing in the region and why, instead of only highlighting what is going wrong. You need to present, or we need, and I need to present solutions instead of only bringing out the problems. When you present solutions, people take these solutions and they discuss them at home. Whatever is being discussed at home is being discussed in the market, in the street, among friends groups. So this is how you start, and this is how the snowball effect grows in the society. So this is to speak from a point of view or an experience that I can contribute with as a woman. Yeah.
Thank you so much for stressing so much the idea that we can't really copy, and I fully resonate that as an Eastern European. You can't really copy institutions from outside, you know, and simply put them at home. We need to see a natural evolvement, keeping what's best. Like you said, there are a lot of good things also in Pan-Arabic culture, and at the same time, let us focus also as a media, let us focus on the recipe for success. How did they make it, in what context? Because even in the West, if you look at the history, not only of feminism, but more widely at women's rights, there was a struggle each time over there, and there were battles after battles. And I love the comparison, particularly looking at the climate in MENA with the snowball. So what can I say? Let it snow. Huh? So I'm very happy right now to pass to Anca.
Thank you so much, Radu. I think I have about two quick thoughts on this. One is, if there's something that the region can learn and has been echoed really by my co-panelists, is building wide coalitions across society to push towards both legislation and societal change. This is something that we've seen work you know, in Europe, in the United States, Latin America, and so on. So bringing everybody at the table, men, women, institutions, from the public sector, private sector, and building these coalitions so that everybody understands that women's rights are human rights, and that it is in everybody's best interest that we reach gender equality, right? Even from the perspective of a partner who may find that he's suddenly not in, you know, in the position where the entire burden of providing for the household falls on them, where they have the freedom to perhaps stay at home, cook, you know, be with the children, or be an artist. It doesn't bring in all of the income that is needed for the household because the spouse or their partner worked well. So I think it's a lot of framing and building these wide coalitions. But culture is and has always been a living organism, right? As history has shown us, we evolve and we pick the things that progressively work for us as a society from culture, and we leave some behind, right? 100 years, it was common that children will be spanked at school if they misbehaved. 200 years ago, pillaging and killing in a war civilians was ultimately understood as part of the norms. We don't accept that nowadays. And I think, again, this is a role playing cultures do evolve. And if I do believe that the region has a really strategic advantage here. The Arabic culture is very focused on entrepreneurship and people hustling to make things work. If we look at estimates from the McKinsey study, a full closure of the gender gap would add an additional $170 trillion to the global GDP, because women would be able to really make more money and buy. It's not a question of dividing the pie, it's really increasing it, where everybody gets more, everybody lives better, everybody lives more secure. And I think this is really what the region can do very well, pull on that tradition of entrepreneurship to enable the private sector to get women and ultimately get women voting with their wallets, because that is one of the most straightforward ways to make change, by showing the women are not a niche market, whether it's in politics or the private sector. 50% of leaders are women, 50% of consumers are women. Women make overwhelmingly decisions for households purchases. And so once we get the stakeholders to understand that, I think we can get changing.
Thank you so much. And not only power to the women, but also financial power to the women. I loved your focus on consumer aspect, financial issues. Thank you so much also for the historic perspective and putting the data behind the McKinsey study. And not only, I would just want to tell you that we are in the final 5-10 minutes of our debate. We've been getting a lot of interest online. Let me just respond to one of our people in the audience who asked more about the Beijing platform, and then we can move into another question. Essentially, the Beijing platform is the most progressive blueprint for, let's say, women's rights, which has been adopted in the 90s, mid-90s, 1995. It keeps being improved each day. You can find for sure more data on this on UN Women and so on. And now I'd also pose a short question to all of you, because in a way we touched upon it. It has to do with mentalities, a question on pop culture. The question was about how do we feel TV shows, particularly, I wouldn't necessarily call them sitcoms, but let's say serial TV, could change mentalities across MENA. And my question to you, to adapt to this would be, do you feel there are any series who are really game changers right now to viewers across MENA in terms of women empowerment? And if not, could we point out to some other quality pop culture across the world, which could be an inspiration for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Radu. Let me tell you that the first woman entrepreneur in the history of the Arab world was Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, 1400 years ago. So when we speak about culture, our culture refrain or encourage, these are stereotypes. The Arab culture, don't envelop us and don't envelop yourself in any culture, because culture today, due to the innovation of technology, all cultures are open to others. And the Arab culture is not a unique, homogeneous one, because since I told you that in the same country, in the same society, everywhere in the Arab world, you may have people who are open-minded and others who are blinded. You may say that cultures are obliged to change, to be open, to interact in the world of today. With the impact of the international conventions, especially, we are no more closed as societies. We have signed and ratified international conventions. We are looking after enhancing laws. We are interacting and working on a regional basis. We are sharing experiences among Arab countries. We have a large set of attitudes which can bring us either to the north or to the south of change. The south being the very beginning of change. So it's not geographic, it's more geometric in my speak. Anyway, we should consider that media play a role. Luna stressed on this very much, but films can play a role as well. Turkish films are very known in the Arab world today, and the Turkish films usually are ambiguous. They sometimes reproduce roles, and in other times they set new life and new roles in a society and within the family as well. The Egyptian cinema used to have a very important role traditionally, and the Egyptian cinema moved forward lately, and they have a real change in the substance of films in the Egyptian cinema and films usually. And we have seen earlier some specific films, some famous films which made a real change in the Arab world because they raised some issues and they shocked the public opinion. So films can play a role, of course they can. Newspapers, all tools of the media can play a role, social media as well. But I think that we have to work on multiple fronts. It's a multiple front fighting. And we have to work all together to bring a change. And anyway, we have to consider the strategy and priorities. And we have to give the chance of having its own agenda to each society, to each country, to each state, regarding the most hot issues they may are confronted to. So you have countries who are confronted to war. Others are confronted to migration, to forced displacement. Others have economic issues at the very high level. So we have to be flexible in looking at agendas, and we have to keep in mind that we are fighters for the best of our world of today and tomorrow. We have to work all together and to be open-minded enough not to have stereotypes in mind when we try to deal with anyone and with any country. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you too very much. Speaking of multiple fronts, Karima, on your front.
Well, Radu, while listening to Fadia about very nice examples in our media, I was thinking what is inspiring me. And as a working mom, I have a few spare time. And one of my guilty pleasures is watching Arab Idol. It must be very famous with you, but what I love about Arab Idol, it's a very famous program in the MENA region with very beautiful classic Arab music. And what I see there is that the jury is men and women. The candidates are men and women, and the presentation is also by men and women. And the production team behind this very successful program, which reaches many people in the Arab region, is also mixed with men and women. And for me, Arab Idol is a good example because that reaches many houses and many families and boys and girls who watch that. There's equality for men and women in the jury, in the presentation, but also for the candidates. So if I have a little spare time and it's available, then I can enjoy that very much.
Thank you so much. Luna, from your front.
Well, I go to a bit of a different platform to be inspired or to actually look for something that makes me resonate with change. I watch a lot of women comedians worldwide, but also in the Arab region and in Lebanon. And in Lebanon, we actually have some amazing actresses who use their Instagram platform to inform the people more, and women and men, about what is happening or what is wrong with the society. We have specifically one comedian, her name is Shadan, and for me, I think she's very powerful because she doesn't censor herself, and she discusses a lot of issues, including, for example, taboo issues like what is so wrong about discussing our periods. or our rights, to talk about our bodies and our periods. And I think that for me, I do spend a lot of free time on social media, and just by scrolling through Instagram and watching all of these women comedians convey certain issues in a comedian way, in a funny way, light, but also emphasizing on the structural dilemma and what needs to be changed in our society. I think that this inspires me, and it also inspires a lot of women around me. We discuss it all the time. I do feel that there's space for women directors and producers to work on more big media content, let's say TV, as Dr. Fadia was saying, some series, maybe some short documentaries, or even some long-form movies that actually discuss issues that are happening with women or challenges. We have the famous Nadine Labaki in Lebanon, who worked on multiple productions and films where the women were centered in the midst of what was happening, or in the midst of cultural or of sectarian problems. I think that we need more of that. Not everyone has to be high ranked, but university graduates deserve platforms on TVs, on local TVs. They deserve to be headhunted by production companies and allowed to produce this, because this is what keeps the conversation going. And finally, and I really hope that if there are some influencers in the MENA region and the Arab world who are listening to this panel, they also have to use their platforms, because so many young women and teenagers are all over their Instagram profiles, and they're inspired by what they do, from makeup tutorials to what they wear, to how they spend their time, what they eat, how they exercise. So why not talk more about the gender gap and what we need culturally in the society? I think this is how you push young women into wearing makeup, fixing their hair, while going to the street and demanding their basic rights. And we've seen this in multiple Instagram accounts and influencers all over the world, where they would be putting their makeup on, but also discussing domestic violence, for example. We need more of this in the MENA region, because Twitter and Instagram also have higher reach and have a lot of audience, as much as TV does. So.
Thank you so much, Luna. A great point on Instagram influencers. We're in great touch with the times and so on. Last but not least, Anca, we very much welcome your thoughts.
Thank you, Radu. Unfortunately, I have to decline my competency into what are the sort of popular series in the Arab world. My Arab language skills are not good enough to enable me to watch them. But let me give you one example that I think has proved very successful, which is the Marvel series. All of the movies may seem like an odd example, but I think you need to look not only at shows and TV series that women are watching, but you need to particularly target them that are known to attract a male-focused audience. Because it's only by including examples of strong women, women in leadership position, women that are quite frankly saving the world, and not only metaphorically, at least in comics, that men see those examples, that idea starts being normalized with them. And so I would say those are the type of series and movies that I find can be particularly useful. Those that are demographically targeted at men, especially young men, to get them exposed and have these ideas normalized.
Thank you so much for this final comment. You know, I change them while they're young and can still be changed. We grasp this as a strategic advice. Thank you so much.
Can I add one more quick note?
Please.
I was reminded by a friend just now, since we're talking about social media, the most vivid example of using social media to demand your rights as a woman are Iranian women who have been using social media. And here I want to just briefly talk about my Stealthy Freedom campaign and a dear friend, Masih Alinjad, who's been using her platforms for years to discuss the oppression that women are going through in Iran. So this is something that we can learn from. Of course, the politics and the geopolitics are very different. We are not here to compare, but we can learn on how these platforms play up until today a role in triggering the small changes in the society, where we see sometimes women women walking in the streets of Tehran on the singing or trying to take off their headscarf or trying to get on a bicycle, which is something normal and something that every woman should be able to do. So we can also learn a lot from Iranian women and activists who, in my opinion, has started this sort of cultural, political revolution in the region.
Thank you so much for providing this example. And I think combined with also one of the main lessons that we have had during this panel, that that across the region, countries are very different. And you can't really, not only don't you have a recipe to adapt for the whole region, but even for different regions within the region is difficult to align people, to put people on the same page. The fight goes on. And from this perspective, I would like to thank you so much for 1 hour and 15 minutes of pure inspiration. You have been inspiration to me, to our viewers. We're going to wrap it up here. We're going to be punctual. Thank you so much. And thank you so much also for watching. Clayton?
Thank you, Radu, to you and to your guests also for a phenomenal conversation. I specifically, I learned a lot from the conversation as well, particularly the point that someone made about how comedy can be used to educate people also in a light kind of way, that it doesn't always have to be these kind of tough conversations or these heavy political conversations, but that something as accessible as comedy can actually be used to educate people. One particular such show that I found on Netflix called Nanette, I found particularly enlightening as a man also to learn about my own blind spots that I have when it comes to gender politics. So yeah, thank you also to you and the panel for those insights. So we have come almost to the end of our program. We have one final part of this conversation. And for this final part, I want to invite back onto our global virtual stage, Mr. Dirk Kunze, the Regional Director of FNF MENA, for one final time. So Dirk, let me just step out from in front of you like a tiny.
I'm looking down. I'm way big.
Yes. It's been a great and jam-packed 2 days. In fact, I want to ask you this question. Given this jam-packed day that we've had, what has been kind of the standout or some of the takeaways for you personally?
Yeah, Clinton, I mean, the whole point is like that, we tried something out within a short amount of time. And I think it was phenomenal to see how all these different parts were actually working together and how they were actually how we made it also with your help to bring them together. Content-wise, I need to say, it was just as Radu just finished his part as well, saying it was an inspiration on so many levels. The way we did it, the way we tried to have new grounds on trying out, bringing the message about, and to reaching new target groups, but also what we talked about. I mean, we had a variety of. We talked about networks and how we have to rethink them in times right now, as we can see when we can't network that much anymore, or actually better network, but we have to completely rethink. We launched a complete new platform for rethinking politics in the MENA region. And, this is what we do, being an enabler for so many creative minds, and ended up today, really talking the big politics and of geopolitical issues, how, for example, China's role in the MENA region is developing and on the foreground of artificial intelligence. These are the networks, the connections that I'm so proud of, that we were able to touch upon them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of these networks and these connections, where do you see well, let me ask it this way. What do you hope the future holds for the relationship and the partnership between FNF and the MENA region?
I think it's a very interesting and vivid and very creative relationship that we have, because it was mentioned in so many panels before how young the population is of this region, how creative it can be, and how big the potential is for development. And this goes very much for this region, and there is so much to be done. So actually, like, concentrating on bridging this gap between the young and creative mind and this kind of traditional system that we're still working with, I think this is the main challenge, and but also the very interesting and fantastic part that we can look forward to. And with the Innovation and Politics Forum, we have only one platform of so many that FNF MENA is doing.
Yeah. I want to also, I mean, you spoke a little bit about the process of putting this event together. And we've, of course, heard about the challenges in the region that many people are facing. I want to ask you now, in terms of the process of putting this event together and the innovation that it takes to put a global virtual stage out there. I mean, it's pushing the boundaries in a way. It's pioneering this type of virtual event, despite a lot of constraints and despite a lot of obstacles. I mean, it doesn't just happen. We know this, of course. But I want to ask, you from your perspective, what do you think on a leadership level allows a team and allowed your FNF team to innovate in this way? What are the qualities or the attributes that you encourage in a team in order to make that happen?
Well, it was certainly not easy to do this kind of event, especially like if you look at the time constraints that we had. I mentioned it in the very beginning. We were really, really, really looking forward and holding on to the idea of physically interacting. And we talked about this so many times, how important this is in the business that we're in the business of ideas, the business of politics and education, that we are actually physically interacting with each other. So we were trying to do that, and we had, within no time, within only 1 week, we tried to, and I think successfully, very successfully, made this digital event happening that is more than just a Zoom conference. A Zoom conference is fantastic nowadays. We can do so many things now, but we need to be there to reach people and pick them up where they are. And I don't know if this is now the place where they are. We're trying things out, and this is what we need to do. And when you ask, like, for the team, of course, like I'm having the least influence on this, I would say. I'm the one who says, like, let's do it. Let's go in this direction. let's think outside of the box. Yeah. But if you don't have proper people around you, then it will not work. And having an atmosphere that hopefully, like, I mean, it's difficult. I'm certainly not the easiest one to work with, but certainly, like, being fair, accountable, and working with the responsibility of people. This is what makes it work. And in this incident, I do need to say, I thank very much Yara Asmar, who put so much of her work in this conference, in this forum, and we all, like, are pretty much dead after these 2 days. I forgot yesterday also to mention Viniti, so I will do that here, because, like, she's also the back on the social media level. So there's so many helping hands, and they all need to come together. This doesn't go without any kind of friction, of course not. But the end result, this is what matters, and this is what we are after. And I think we can be very, very proud of what we have done in this Amman Innovation and Politics Forum.
Indeed. I mean, to bring it back to actually what you said right at the start of your of this 2-day forum, in your opening remarks, you said something that stuck with me. You said, you can invent alone, but you cannot innovate alone. And I think that's such a nice way of summarizing what it takes to put an event like this together. So from my side, I also want to thank you and your team for putting this event together, also in partnership with the VVD International, with Silk, the SILC, and then of course also with the FNF Mediterranean project, and those individuals that you also mentioned. I also want to give a special shout out to Antoinette, who's working behind the scenes, and also the whole tech team, or the tech magicians, as I would call them now, here in the studio in Istanbul. It's a whole team effort, and I hoped that through the social media accounts that we shared, the backstage, looking for people to also get an idea of what it takes to put this event together. So, lastly, Dirk, this brings us to the end of this two-day phenomenal event. It's been quite a journey. It's been up and down. It's been thought-provoking. It's been challenging. And it's also been engaging in a completely different way, something that is a little bit different just to a lot of people just sitting behind their, with little windows that make you think of those childhood programs we used to see when we grew up. So thank you for pioneering this. Thank you to you at home also for joining us and for contributing. And from our side, from Dirk and my side, we want to say thank you to you. Keep innovating, keep the conversation going on #InnovatingPolitics. Until we see you next year, I don't know where we go from this, Dirk. We're probably going to have to hold this in space next year. That's the only way you can go up from here.
We know that we will have you with it, because thank you also for you. You were the red thread that put everything also together on the screen for everyone. Thank you so much, Clinton. You were fantastic. Thank you very much, and everyone.
Thanks a lot, Dirk. Cheers, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful afternoon, wherever you are. Until we see you next year.